Okay, good morning, everybody. Thank you for joining us today to attend this workshop, Building Modern Web Apps with Lightning Web Components. So we are also streaming this workshop live for the attendees across APAC region. For those of you joining us online, thank you for joining us. We are going to get started right away. One important thing to note for the guys attending online is that since this is being live streamed, there might be some disturbances or I might be walking around, so there might be instances where my voice is not clearly audible. So please bear with us for that inconvenience. And people attending the workshop here live, please make sure you put your phones on silent so that people attending online are not disturbed. Okay, so before we jump right in, I want to show you guys the forward-looking statement. So what this basically says is, we are a publicly traded company, Salesforce. So if you are planning to make any purchasing decisions regarding licenses or anything of that sort, please make it based on whatever is available publicly on the Salesforce website and not based on what we are talking about today. Because we work for Salesforce in the developer relations team. I am Aditya, by the way, and he is Satya. He's joining me today to help you guys if you have any questions, or maybe he'll walk around and look at if you're doing it correctly or not. So both of us are from the Salesforce developer relations team, and we sometimes get to know some internal information about the products that are being launched and stuff. So we might make some forward-looking statements. So please don't make your purchasing decisions based on that. Please look at the website and then make your decisions. So another housekeeping item, this webinar is being recorded. It is going to be posted directly on the Salesforce developers YouTube channel. So people, if you guys want to refer to this webinar again or this workshop again, you can look for it in YouTube. And people joining us online, it will be posted on the same registration link that you guys used to register for this webinar. And we are very active on social as Salesforce developers. So these are our handles. So you can feel free to follow us, chat with us on any of these channels. So what's today's agenda? So before we begin with our hands-on workshop, we will be giving you an introduction of Lightning Web Components. It is the framework on which we are going to work on today. And we're also going to talk about what is new in web standards and why we have come up with this Lightning Web Component framework. So it's going to be an initial 10 minutes introduction. After that, we'll directly get started with hands-on. And for those joining us online, so if you are already a Salesforce developer, it is important to know that we are going to be talking about the open source version of the Lightning Web Component framework. So we are going to be building an open source app using this framework and not a Salesforce deployment. So I just want to level set the expectations. So in order to understand why we have come up with Lightning Web Components and how the web world has changed, it is helpful to look back into 2014. Back then, the web standards, I hope everyone is able to see the screen, right? So back then, the web standards was very small. I mean, your browser was capable of understanding and executing very little in terms of standard elements or standard events like on-click and stuff. That is what your browser was capable of doing. But even in 2014, you guys are building enterprise-grade applications where you require reusable components, you require single-page applications, you want the web to be faster, but your browser as such was not capable of doing all of that, which is when multiple vendors have come in and they have solved this problem by means of creating a framework. And there were different companies that try to solve this in different ways, as a result of which you have n number of frameworks right now in the industry. So the potential problem with this is that you build an app using one framework, it is not compatible with the other, and you spend a lot of time learning one framework as a developer, but if your company requests you to build a project on another framework, you're again learning from scratch. So those are some problems which come with all of these multiple frameworks out there. But what has happened in the past 5 years is that the web technologies as such has seen an unprecedented level of innovation. So right now in 2019, you will see that the web standards has increased significantly. That is, whatever the browser is capable of doing is a lot more than what it was in 2014. So now what happens? Because the web standards is large, Your frameworks don't need to solve a lot of problems that the web standards are already solving. So your framework is only going to provide specialized services that Lightning Web Component Framework is also going to do. We are going to talk about it later. So you'll notice that as and when we push web standards forward, the framework layer is going to get thinner and thinner. So in the end, there might possibly come up a future where you're purely building on web standards without the use of any framework. Now you ask me why it is important to build using web standards. Because let's take an example that you're building on a particular framework. So you're writing some JavaScript code, which is then understood by the framework, which is again a JavaScript bundle. It is compiled down and to make the browser understand it. So there is some amount of latency, some amount of performance issues that you run into. But if you build directly using web standards, these are the syntaxes that your browser directly understands. It doesn't need a framework in between for translation. So because you are directly executing your code on a browser, that is the fastest way of executing your JavaScript code. Which is why now we try to build components or anything using the latest web standards. And you'll notice the most prominent web standard that we have put on top is web components, which we are going to look at today. That is web components again comprises of different technologies. We'll get into that. You also have custom elements, Shadow DOM as a part of web components. You have templates and modules. So ECMAScript, if you look at the box on 2014, ECMAScript was at version 5. Now it is version 9. So there are a lot of standards that ECMAScript also has defined. So ECMAScript is a standard on which JavaScript is built. Okay, so it has evolved a lot. And this syntactical wise also now there are easier ways of doing the same things, like you have promises and all in order to do asynchronous operations. So there is a lot of things that are happening in JavaScript also. A little overwhelming to catch up with in a 1-hour session, but you will soon learn all of it during the course of this. Now, who is driving all of these web standards forward? It is these two standard organizations, W3C and TC39. And Salesforce happens to be a member of both of them. So we, in collaboration with these two standard organizations, are trying to push web standards as much as possible. So one of the motto that Salesforce has is obviously to make customers successful. But we also build tools that make developers successful, because in the end, a developer experience is as equally important as your end user or customer experience. So that is what we try to do. And in the end, if your developer is happy, developer is building good products, your customer is happy. So it's that whole logic that runs. So now what are web components? Out of the new standards, we have web components. Most of you might already be aware of this, but just to cover it again for everyone. Web components are used to build reusable snippets of code. And web components internally are built on these three standards, that is custom elements, Shadow DOM, and HTML templates. So what is a custom element? Before learning that, we'll see what are standard elements. Standard elements is something that you guys are already using. Like you use the HTML tag, body, div, p, h1, h2, h3 to h6. All of those are called standard tags or standard elements. Now, custom elements is something where you can define your own. So here in the example on the screen, I'm showing a hello world as an example. So hello world is a custom element that I created. So what really a custom element means is that if you inspect element on your Chrome and look at the HTML tree, it actually says hello-world in one of the tags. Okay, so that is a custom element that you're creating. And it is, the second standard is Shadow DOM. So now once you have your custom element defined, you're going to add some functionality to it. And you want your functionality to be encapsulated within your own component so that other components cannot influence your component. You want to build in some security. That is where Shadow DOM is going to come into picture. It is a rather complex topic to actually talk about. If you see it, you'll understand it better, because what Shadow DOM does is it creates a subtree within your entire HTML tree. So even though it is a part of your HTML DOM, it actually acts independently as well. We are going to look at an example once you build a Lightning Web component, but this is one of the standard. Finally, you have HTML templates. Again, the elements that you see, that is a template tag and the slot tag, those are again web standards as a part of HTML5. Those have been released, which allow you to create reusable HTML code snippets. What it means is if you use a HTML template tag and write content within it, your browser is not going to show it on the screen. You will have to fetch that content using JavaScript and insert it into the DOM. So you'll actually have to write document.getElementById, specify the template tag's ID, then get the contents of it, and then insert it into the DOM. which gives you the flexibility to write your code once and insert it wherever you want. So now all of these are web standards. But in order to build these, you're going to have to write some amount of code, which the code is again going to be written multiple times. So if you create multiple web components, you're going to have to copy paste that code multiple amount of times, which is where a framework like Lightning Web Components has been introduced. I mean, other frameworks as well, where all your reusable things, so the code snippets or I would say the boilerplate code that you keep writing again and again and again, the framework takes care of it for you. So you build only what is necessary. Don't worry about all the other stuff. So with that, let me introduce you to Lightning Web Components. So like I said, we have built this framework on top of web standards. This is heavily reliant on web standards, which I want to see over the course of this workshop. All the modern web standards, ES6, custom elements, modules, templates are used. It is built for performance because our framework is very lightweight. As a matter of fact, the open source version, the runtime is 7 KB. So it's that lightweight, which is not doing a lot of things because the web standards itself has evolved. Finally, the most important part is it is compatible. So IE11 is a browser that generally doesn't catch up to standards as much as we want, but it turns out most of our customers are very interested to use only IE11 for God knows what reasons. So our framework, what it does, you write your components. If your browser is capable of executing web components by itself because it is modern, it runs on web components. But if you run it on an old browser, we add the required polyfills so that your component executes on IE11 as well. The only difference being, if your browser is built for modern web apps, you are going to get all the benefits of the modern framework. But if we add the polyfills, you might not be getting all the performance benefits, but you as a developer don't have to worry about compatibility issues. And we also maintain backwards compatibility. That is something that Salesforce has been doing a lot. So Salesforce as a company has started in 1999. And all the products that we build are backwards compatible. So you are still able to run stuff that is built in 1999. Okay, so you don't need to worry about what if this is deprecated or stuff like that. Now, why we built it? It is built mostly on standards, less proprietary. So you learn it once. You are learning web standards more than anything. So your skills are reusable basically, which is transferable. It is easier to find and ramp up developers. So developers like you, if you're already aware about building apps on JavaScript, you can learn web components within 1 hour. So that is what we are going to do in workshop today. And there is a lot of standard tooling, better performance. You will realize all of these benefits as and when you look at the components. Now we launched Lightning Web Components in January on the Salesforce platform. Many of our customers have been using it. All the developers who are building apps right now on Salesforce are building it on Lightning Web Components. Because of which all our huge customer base, everyone has seen performance benefits. Everyone has gotten to know that their applications became faster. The developers are feeling that their code is more maintainable and reusable now. So because we have seen all these benefits, we have decided to open source this framework. So because we have open sourced it, you can use the same framework to build apps on the Salesforce platform and more importantly, off the platform as well. So today we are going to be looking at the open source version of it. That means none of you guys need to know anything about Salesforce. All you need to know is JavaScript and web standards, and you can start using this framework right away. One of the advantages, because it is open source, is you get to look at the source code of the framework, which is available publicly on GitHub. Submit issues if you find any. If you find any features that you feel will be useful, you can build out those features and submit a pull request to us. So we have truly open sourced it. You will explore the source code and you will be actually contributing to the entire roadmap because you are contributing something to our framework which you feel is beneficial to the larger developers. And we being a part of the standard organizations related closely to them, we can tell them confidently that, okay, the developers are expecting this feature to be a standard. Right now they have added it to the framework, but it will be useful if we add it to the standard as well. So we will be able to push the web forward on your behalf. So we can help you with that. So truly, let's take an advantage of this open source. And the very first statement I said, you can build it on any platform. So Lightning Web Components is a purely UI-based framework. So you're free to use any backend of your choice. You want to connect to a database of your wish, you can feel free to do that. And after you build out your app locally, you can deploy it onto any of the platforms that are available. Okay, so truly we are releasing the power of open source to all of you. Salesforce is one of the deployments framework. Okay, so you don't worry that this is a Salesforce thing. Do I need to learn Salesforce and all of that? It is not required. Salesforce is one of the many deployment options that we are giving it to you. But this framework as such is open. Now, because it is open, you get to use all of these tools, which are again open source tools, over your entire deployment lifecycle. So as a matter of fact, when you are trying to build apps using this framework, we internally use Webpack in order to provision you with the dev server, in order to provision you with all the beautiful things that come with Webpack. The bundling that comes with it, all of it is handled by Webpack. There is TypeScript support. If you want to write test scripts, of course, any application has to be tested. So we give you the provision of writing test scripts using the open source framework called Jest. So you can do that as well. Quality controls and deployment controls like CI/CD tools, because it is open source purely, you can use any open source CI/CD tool of your choice. Circle CI is one thing that we internally use a lot in order to manage our deployment life cycles. Heroku again is one of the many platform as a service applications on which you can deploy this application. So just to give you a high level overview of open source at Salesforce, it is not that we open sourced only Lightning Web Components. So we have been actively involved in many other open source projects like Apache Phoenix and stuff. And we have also open sourced the tools that we built. For example, Lightning Design System is our CSS framework that allows you to build pixel perfect applications. So we use like a lot of scalable vector graphics, and also that your UI is really perfect on any resolution of a screen. And we implement a lot of design patterns in it, all in accordance with industry best practices. The entire Salesforce user interface that our customers use and that we provide out of the box is built on Lightning Design System. So we are actively using it, and because we found the benefits, we are open sourcing it. Now, that is all the theory that I'm going to tell you, just so that you know what is the background of what Lightning Web Components are, what is open source, why have we open sourced, and as Salesforce as a company, what are we exactly trying to achieve. So now with that sorted, let's get on to our hands-on workshop. And every one of you who's connected to the internet, you can go to this shortcode sforce.co/learnlwc. That is going to be the place where you can start learning about this framework, and you can do this within 1 hour. So let me do that on my screen as well. You should all come to this page once you go to that shortcode. Yeah, this is the shortcode sforce.co/learnlwc.
If you need any help, you can just call me and get help here.
So once you're all on the landing page, after you go to sforce.co/lwc, feel free to bookmark this, because this is the place from which you're going to start every time. So if you scroll a little bit to the bottom, you'll see different kinds of things that you can do. In 1 hour, what can you learn? In 2 hours, what can you learn? And there is a detailed documentation that we have put together. So if you have time more than 3 hours, you can actually go through the entire detailed documentation about what we are using in Lightning Web Components. And what you'll notice is all of this is powered with our learning platform, that is Trailhead. Okay, so Trailhead is a learning platform that Salesforce, we created it, and it is completely gamified. So it is not like we are going to provide you with a documentation which you go through for 3 hours and maybe fall asleep. So this is a completely gamified version where you learn something, and then there is maybe a quiz that you answer in order to validate if you have learned things correctly or not. And finally, sometimes we also give you the provision of a hands-on challenge, wherein you can actually try it out for free. So very important thing to note is that all of this is completely free. We are not going to charge a single penny. This platform, this Trailhead as a platform, includes a whole lot of content, not just related to Salesforce, but it contains things like using advanced modern JavaScript, how to use GitHub, how to use GitLab. And it also contains things like how to promote equality, how to negotiate with your manager, your communication skills. This is a completely gamified learning platform that, like, how many million Salesforce developers do we have? A lot, right? So everyone is on this platform. So this is where we are trying to put all of our content so that it is at one central place. So to get started, let's click Get Started on this link, and again you'll come to something called as a trail. Okay, so all of you have playlists on your phone, so which is a collection of music of your choice. So a trail is something that we have like 2 projects or 3 projects that you build, and these are going to teach you different levels of Lightning Web Components. So today, because we are going to spend 1 hour learning about web components, we are going to be doing the first project, which is going to teach you everything about Lightning Web Components, and you're going to build a full-fledged app. It is not like you're building a hello world application. You're actually building an application that can be used. Okay, so now this project is going to show you a bunch of instructions on how you can get started and stuff. So before that, I would recommend you all sign up. By clicking on this link, you can use any of your existing credentials, Gmail, Facebook, in order to sign up.
Yeah.
Now, the reason you need to sign up is because when we validate these challenges, we actually need to know who you are, where are you validating it. So a user ID is of course required for us to validate your challenges, which is when just click on sign up on Trailhead. People joining us online, you can do it as well. If you're already on Trailhead, just log in. Don't worry about Salesforce and all, just sign up with Google, LinkedIn, email, and if you want more options, Facebook is also available. So we are going to give you like 2-3 minutes just to sign up, and after that we can get started with your project.
If you have any problems registering or logging into your Trailhead account, just let me know. I'm here to help you out.
Yeah, once you complete your entire sign up and the authentication happens, you'll be landing to the same page. But what you'll see is your name on the top right corner. Probably because you're new, it is going to be 0 badges and 0 points. So this is what we call as gamification, where you complete some stuff, you're going to get a badge. So if you notice, the projects, each of them has a beautiful little logo. So this we are calling as badges. So every time you complete a project or every time you complete a unit that you learn, you're going to get a badge. And within Salesforce ecosystem, these badges are resume worthy. Okay, so people actually put the number of Trailhead badges they have on their resume when they go to an interview. So that is what is the power of Trailhead that we are providing to our ecosystem here. So has everyone signed up? Everyone is done. Anyone else who's left out? No? Okay. We'll give you like 2 more minutes, after which we can get started with the first project.
So when people are signing up, you can see this is the trail. When we say trail, it's a collection of badges, collection of modules. You have work on your very first project. And you have 2 more projects. If you want to go deep into the Lightning Web Components, then after completing this project, probably you can go back and try the other 2 projects as well.
Okay. So I think everyone is set up. Let's get started. Yeah, one or two we can you can catch up. We are going to go at a slower pace. It's fine. So click on the first project, which is going to say build your first application with Lightning Web Components open source. I've completed this, so it is showing a lot of green ticks. For you, it is not going to show it. Don't worry. So this is how a typical project is structured. You're going to have multiple units, and we also specify how much time it takes to complete each unit. So let's click on the first one, create an application. Okay, so this is going to talk about how you can create your first application on your local system using Lightning Web Components framework. All the introduction I've already given to you, so don't worry about it. And in order to see what is the end product of what you're going to build today, you can just click on the link that is present in what you build. And this is the app that you're going to build today in 1 hour. Okay, so you're going to have a bunch. It is a conference management application. So we are at a conference, so it is the best use case to show. You have a title, you have a list of sessions, you have where that session is happening, you have who is the speaker for that session. In case there are more than one speakers, we show their profile pictures, and you can also filter through the sessions. So all of this functionality we are going to build within this 1 hour. Now, before diving any further, I mean, you can basically, we have designed this to be a learn at your own pace kind of environment, Trailhead. But since I am the instructor here today, I can little tweak it a bit. So one more important link that all of you have to remember and bookmark is lwc.dev, which is actually the homepage for this entire framework. It's going to show you a quick start guide on how you can install this, and also a detailed documentation if you click on guide. So anything and everything that has to do with Lightning Web Components is present here. And in the top right corner, you will see there is a AutoCAD button that actually takes you to the GitHub repo of the Lightning Web Components framework. So here is where you can look at the source code, submit pull requests, submit issues that we are going to actively be looking at. So we are maintaining it, so 10 hours ago, which is pretty recent. So make sure you bookmark this, but I'm going to walk you through most of the steps today, so let's not worry too much about that. Now, the very first step that you have to do is make sure you have Node.js installed on your systems. How many of you have Node.js installed? Latest version is good. So if anyone else who hasn't installed it, okay, please just you can go to Node.js and install it. It is a straightforward thing.
Yeah, probably it will not take more than a couple of minutes. So it can give a couple of minutes for you to install Node.js.
Yeah, there is actually a link to Node.js inside our Trailhead content as well. So important notes, make sure you have the latest version. We also specify a version that we are most compatible with. So you can install it by clicking there. It says the LTS version, any version in which npx is present, which is going to be anything greater than 5.2 should work. Which one? This one? So these hyperlinks you can actually click, takes you directly to the website. We are still in important notes. Don't jump ahead because you're all newbies. It will be confusing if you jump ahead. But just install Node first, and then we are going to talk about the remaining steps.
So Node.js, you can take recommended for most users version. So it should be on the screen. So in case depending on your operating system, you can
yeah, the LTS one is what you can download, which is recommended for most users. Okay, so installation done. Okay, so while you guys finish installation, so today we are going to use a tool called Create LWC App. If people are familiar with developing React applications, you'll know that there is a similar command called LWC, create React app or stuff like that. So this is again an open source tool that we created so that you run this tool, we install the required framework, we install the required dependencies, the web pack that we were talking about, and the basic scaffolding of your whole project. So what is the folder structure that is going to be when you want to build apps with Lightning Web Components? So all of that is going to get created right away using this one command. So that is why we are using this toolkit. As mentioned here, it is not really a mandatory requirement. It is just that we recommend this because it comes with a lot of features that allow you to easily build apps. You're talking about 1 hour, so we want to simplify things as much as possible. So once you have Node installed, just copy this and open up a terminal and run this command. So npx is your Node package installer. We recommend using npx instead of npm because npx always tries to install using the latest version that is online. If it is npm, you download the package and you'll have to worry about updating it all the time, which we don't really want. So use npx of the create React app and finally give the name of your project that you want to build. It's going to be conference app in this case. You can create it in any location that you want. So if you're using Windows systems, it doesn't really matter. All this is going to do is create a folder structure with the dependencies. So wherever you want to do it, you can. Documents, D drive. So I'll run this command. It takes like a minute or two, depending on the internet's bandwidth, to actually download the required tool set down to your local system. So let's do that. In the meanwhile, people who haven't installed Node yet, please continue with installation and run this command. Okay, we'll let this keep happening for some time. In the meanwhile, I think I can show you the create React app. So let's create LWC app. So again, this tool is completely open source. So again, same thing, submit issues, pull requests if you find any issues. But what this is also going to have is it's going to have a bunch of documentation on what commands can you run using this tool. These are some of the commands that we are going to be running in order to build our applications. And powering all of this are multiple dependencies. We are going to look at all of it once our folder structure gets created. Okay, so I think the command has run and every one of you should be seeing this screen where it says Lightning Web Components with a bunch of Lightning logos, and it's going to ask you for a package name. So here you're going to be giving some basic information about your project. What is the project's name, whatever is the description of your project, and we're going to take a look at the options. You can feel free to use all the defaults, except when I tell you not to use a default. So you feel free to give a description of your own choice. I just use defaults for everything. Who's the author, version? Because this is all open source, we recommend putting in a license type as well. And if in case you want to use the power of GitHub and keep committing this code, which we always recommend, you can associate a GitHub repo with this and your username. And once you come to this section about the package manager, so we are giving you an option to use either npm or yarn in order to build your packages or to run the commands that we give you. Okay, so that totally depends on your preference. Right now, we are going to use npm, but if one of you wants to use yarn, you can do that. It's just that you'll have to install yarn also on your system. So let's go with npm. The second one, the choice that you have is to use either TypeScript or JavaScript to build your Lightning Web Component apps. So TypeScript is a superset of JavaScript where all your variables and all are strongly typed, as opposed to JavaScript where there is no restriction on data type. You declare a var, use it for whatever you want. So feel free. We will use JavaScript today for this session. And the next option is going to ask you if you want to use a custom Express server. We are building a Node.js project. Ideally, you don't need to be using a custom Express server. For the purpose of, if you're going to work only for a simple application, you can just say no. But like I mentioned before, you're doing a trail, which includes 3 projects. And each project is going to build on top of the other. So the first project doesn't really require an Express server. You can just say no. But if you want to use the same project to build project 2, where you're going to be integrating with an existing data source by writing some commands, authenticating and all of that, you're going to be writing that logic inside an Express app. Okay, so for that, I recommend please choose Y here so that you can build on it after you go back home as well. So this you'll see now it creates a bunch of files, and then it is again going to do the required dependency installs and stuff. Again, it takes a minute or 2. But now you can open this directly in any of your IDE of your choice. Whether you're using Eclipse, VS Code, it doesn't really matter. Even you can do Notepad++. Okay. All we need is a terminal and a place where you can edit these files. Okay.
It's asking for browser also.
What are the options? It's asking Edge or Chrome.
You only use default browser.
Okay, okay. So we have, like I said, this is a continuously maintained project. And what we recently found is even Edge is not so capable of shadow down. So in case you want to deploy this app on Edge, just say yes, so that the required dependencies get installed. For today's purposes, just say no. Don't use Edge, just we are going to execute it on Chrome for today. So these are some updates that we continuously make. So every time you run the app, you might probably see newer options depending on the feedback we get from the larger community. Maybe create a new project. I don't know how it's going to behave because that version was released like last week, I think. So I haven't tried it out really on the latest version. It should be okay. Some other more imports are going to come in, which shouldn't really affect anything. We'll go ahead and see what happens. So learning for me as well. Yeah, let it be like that. We'll see what happens. Yeah.
So we have support for ExpressJS or is there any support for microservices?
So this tool, the LWC Create App tool, is going to create an Express server. But like we mentioned, this tool is not a mandatory thing that you want to use. All you need is a framework to be deployed. So you can use any backend of your choice in that case.
What is Express server?
So Express is bundled along with Node. It's generally a backend framework that you write with Node applications where you create. It's an Express.js, but it's a server-side JS, which runs on the server to provide you the required endpoints that you can consume from the client.
So you're saying instead of that, we can have our own microservices.
Yeah, this is a UI framework. Feel free to use anything backend.
So,
okay. So in my system, it has installed. Yeah, it will take time. It is like depending on the network bandwidth and stuff. Ignore everything. Everything is taken care of. Your app is going to work just fine. It's just because we are using a lot of internal dependencies. If they are deprecated, it shows warnings, but your app is not going to break. I don't see any such error. Maybe Satya can help you out. As long as you get this confetti icon saying conference app created, you should be good.
it's not accepting the latest. So,
Okay, that is strange.
Create an app for money, whatever app you use.
Okay. How many of you guys could install this successfully? Okay. Okay, it's still loading. And some people faced errors. We'll have to look at why. Yeah.
We install because on the page shows that.
Yeah, that you can do it as well, but we are really not going to run any Git commands as such. But it is recommended to install because it is the industry best practice to have a project always on Git, even locally, not a GitHub repo or anything. You need not link it, but it's recommended to have a Git versioning built in. It's fine. Let's skip it. We'll see if you run into any issues. But as long as your folder is created and yeah, we'll take a look. We'll see if you run into issues. But yeah. So what I'm going to do, depending on the ID of your choice, please open the folder in which you have deployed this. So I will do it on my VS Code. Let me close this. Yeah, actually make sure to go into the folder that got created. So in this case, it's going to be conference app. Just change your directory to conference app and then open your IDE. I'm using VS Code. That is my personal preference, but you people can use anything of your choice. So what you'll see here, once you have opened it in an IDE, or if you are just using Windows Explorer, it's fine. What you'll see is this folder structure. The first thing is node modules, which is understood. All the dependencies are put in there. There are some internal scripts in case you want to use Express.js. All of these get run. Don't worry about that too much. Now SRC is the place where all of your code is going to live. And because I had used Express server when creating my app, it's going to create two folders called client and server. If you wouldn't have used Express server, it is directly going to show you the source code for the client. Okay. Don't worry too much about that. You're going to see SRC modules resources index.html without the Express version. With the Express version, there is going to be a client and the server folder. Now, what you see after that is a bunch of configuration files. Now, these are the configuration files that we suggest that you create. I mean, we already created for you. The reason is these are built on industry best practices. So whenever you're writing code, it is important that your code be pretty. So we recommend using an extension like prettier. So you have a configuration file for that. And as per industry best practices, what are the files that you want to ignore when prettifying or beautifying that we put in here? Like for example, library folders need not be prettified. So that can be done. Here is a prettier configuration file. You can override it. All of this prettier is open source. So any configuration options available to you, you can use it here. Then we also install Jest as a framework. So in case you want to run Jest test, there are configuration options available for that as well. Now you have something called as LWC services config. So before knowing what is LWC services config, let's go to package.json. So package.json is a file where you manage all the dependencies for your app. And what you'll notice is our project only has a single dependency, that is LWC services. Why? Because we have bundled all the dependencies into one. So internally we are using Webpack, we are using Express, we are using Jest. So if you list all those dependencies, it will fall again on the hands of the developer to update the version numbers of those dependencies all the time, which is why we have bundled all of those and we are giving you a single dependency which you can update, which is internally going to take care of all the other updates. And then if you scroll a bit down, here is all the scripts that you can run. So over the course of this workshop, we are going to be running 2 or 1 of these scripts, depending on what the Trailhead content has listed. These scripts are going to run some modules from build pack, so the Webpack. So here you see there is a build command, watch command, and all of those. We are going to take a look at all of those.
Standard scripts that could be run.
Yeah, these are standard scripts that can be run on the LWC services bundle that we give you. Yeah.
You cannot add more.
You can add more, but not from the LWC services bundle.
How people do this dependency library? Do we have control over if you want to add some dependency which you add?
You don't have explicit control except for a very few things, because our GitHub repo keeps updating it. So some dependencies like Husky, we automatically update. Right now it is 3.0.9. It was like 0.5 2 weeks back. So there is a bot that we created that updates the dependencies directly on our servers. But since you have already downloaded the code, you'll have to compare yourself to see if there is a latest version and then update it in your local project. I don't know currently of a way to update it locally, but I can always check and get back to you.
So while creating projects, we don't have any configuration for unit systems. Directly, we got this config.
Correct. This is the basic configuration we give you as per industry standards. You can update this configuration, or you can actually run this command. If you run npm run test:unit, in case you have written tests, it directly runs all those tests. So the framework is built in, the configuration file is built in, but we are allowing you as a developer to tweak it so that it can work for you. So this is a bit about package.json. We'll come back to it once you realize what is happening.
One can use other framework other than Jest.
Yeah, you can use another framework other than Jest. So I'm going to be using a lot of VS Code features. Don't worry. You can just run the command line commands from your command prompt as well. So before doing anything further, what we have done till now is we have run a statement which has created this folder structure, dependencies and all. So let's see our app in action. So for that, you can run the command npm run watch. Make sure you're running this from the root folder of the project, that is conference app. So what happens when you run it? In the terminal, in the conference app folder, just run npm run watch. And what you'll see here is it starts a local server on port 3001. Okay, so you can actually go to this URL in your web. Sorry. The last step is to run the command npm run watch. Actually, that is a part of your guide as well. I wouldn't call it a guide per se, but yeah, run the new application, run npm run watch, and it will create a local server for you. Let me organize my windows so that I switch better. Okay, maybe the installation fails. So we can take a look at that. So now you run this on your browser. All of you should be able to see this home page, which is going to show you a web component that is already part of your scaffolding. Okay. Now, two things to note here. One thing here, it talks about editing the app.html and save for live reload. So let's try that. You go to src client modules, I'm going to explain the folder structure, don't worry, but for now I'll show you what happens. So maybe I type in something here. And what happens is, if I go back to my browser, you'll see that it has live reloaded, which means this is one of the features. And the second feature that I was going to talk to you about is the whole local server that got created. So internally, we are using Webpack, like I mentioned earlier. So inside Webpack, there is a feature called dev server. We are provisioning a local Webpack dev server for you, which is capable of this hot reload. So the moment you save a file, dev server is capable of reloading your browser automatically. Okay, we'll check. So now the dev server is capable of that reload. Now what we are, if you notice the command that we have previously run, it is npm run watch. So watch is again another command given by the Webpack, which recompiles your files the moment you save it. So both of these in conjunction together make sure your development is faster. So the moment you update your code, it's going to be compiled and your browser is going to be automatically reloaded, so that you don't have to worry about running a compiler or worrying about whether the component is updated or not, whether the cache is updated or not. All of that you don't need to worry about. Sorry?
It's not loading.
Oh, it's not loading at all? Okay, yeah, the command prompt.
That's it. That's what
But it's locally, it says locally.
It says running on localhost, right?
Yeah, I'm not able to access that.
Okay, so if you're not able to do with 0.0.0.0, try localhost. So http localhost:3001. You can try that out as well.
Why didn't we write localhost there? Because now it's creating either 0.0
Yeah.
or either localhost, because same thing happens with others.
Suggestion taken. I mean, we tested extensively on Mac and it seems to run here. So
Because this one I tried with when you're accessing on the LAN with
Right.
some other machines, they are running their server. That time it takes instance, but generally on local.
correct. Yeah. Yeah.
Because host instances.
Yeah, it is both. So localhost is 0.0.0.0 apparently. I don't know that terminology.
I think 127.0. Yes, right. That is the main thing.
That is also
Mac or Windows make the difference.
correct.
But in Windows, if localhost are writing it,
It will be 127.0.
that again creates a confusion.
Like I said, we mostly tested on Mac, which is why these issues are coming up. So thanks for bringing this up. We'll take it back. We realize this is still being updated, right? So everybody is able to open it on localhost 3001 port. Cool. Okay, so once you do all of this, one of the questions that might come to you is, why is it always 3001? Can I update it to any port of my choice? So that is when you can go to your LWC services config, and there is actually a GitHub link repo that shows you all the configuration options available. And here is where you'll notice that you can configure the dev server to run on whatever port you want. Here it is again listed as 0.0.0. Maybe we'll put localhost as an alternate option. You can do that. And if this is a dev server which is running for development builds. So what if you run it for production? So the production port is different, again 3002. You can feel free to update all of this, which means you're going to have to copy this configuration and update your dev server here. Okay. So this is the place where you update configuration. What are the options available? Go to the GitHub link that is present on the screen to see. So this is essentially going to complete out your first project, first unit in the project, where you successfully create an app and navigate to it. Okay, there is an option to verify the step. So technically we verify the steps that are done on the cloud. So in the subsequent projects, there are some things that you do on the cloud that we can go and verify. But in this case, because everything is local, we can't come into your local system and verify. This is going to be successful by default. I mean, the Trailhead framework is built in a way that it verifies stuff from the cloud. Some things are built locally, but we don't verify that.
Basically, there are three types of things. Like, there are few modules or few chapters there which you only refer or read from the chapter and understand what it is. Okay. In the other kind, where there will be assessment in kind of question and answers. You can mark the multiple choice questions. That's the second way of assessment. And the third way of assessment is where you can do a hands-on exercise, and we are going to verify that the hands-on is properly done or not. So this is the first kind where we need not really verify. So our intention here is to let you understand what is the Lightning Web Component is all about. Okay. Down the line, when we do more chapters, you'll see how it will be verified. So these 100 points are bonus by you.
Yeah, you will get like 400 or 500 by the end of this. Yeah. So once you complete it, you will see an option to go to the next step. Because I've already done it, I'm not seeing. I can navigate from here also. But click on go to the next step so that you modify the default application. So till now, we have spent a lot of time understanding what the framework is about, how to build your local tool. If you're learning at your own pace, you would have done this in that 15 minutes time that we recommended. But since I'm explaining a lot of things, obviously it is taking longer. So in the next step, now you are going to build out your conference management app. Yeah.
How does the vanilla work?
I can show that to you. Correct. Yeah, it is the same concept here as well. So when you're running the watch command, it is actually a development build. But if you go to that scripts that I showed you in the package.json, it actually shows a command that can run a build for production, which is when it is going to create a distribution folder. It's going to webpack all of your components into like 2 JavaScript files, which are minified, and it is going to serve it out. At the end of the demo, we can look at the production version versus the development version to see the file size differences, what are the naming conventions of the files. Everything is going to be production ready. So don't.
And is there any way that we can create instead of putting it in a dist file? Because if you look at it in other frameworks like Angular and React, you can create a build component element. Is there any way?
The distribution file is going to give you the required elements. Right now, we are still in the process of updating it so that you can deploy it cross-platform. So the very question that you asked, how do I bundle a web component and use it on a different framework? We are going to release it shortly.
This is a Angular element concept.
Yeah, same. We are actually moving to a standard, like I said, right? So we want this to be as reusable as possible. So the first step we took is to open source it so that people are using. Now, based on the feedback, we are going to say, build this component here, and these are the steps to deploy it onto an Angular application.
So one question I
the foundation is Lightning Web Components framework. The framework itself is the foundation. It is not built using React or Angular. React or Angular are different frameworks. This is our own framework, and the foundation is that. No existing frameworks we are using. Yeah, you're going to see that it is different from other frameworks, but it is very, very, very close to the web standards. Okay, so all of us, let's go to the next unit. Here is where you'll learn about all the features of Lightning Web Components. Open your conference app, VS Code, expand the client folder, and open index.html. So the way we have structured these projects is we give you a lot of code samples, copy paste them into your own code, and it all works. We also give an explanation of what we are doing in that code sample. So for today, you can copy paste the code sample and I will do the explanation. So you don't need to read through it. Okay, so before you copy paste, what you will notice, where is my, so index.html. Let me open that. So my app and all of this. So this is index.html. I think everyone should be familiar with this. Any web app runs index.html and JS as a root. Everything is HTML content except for my app. So my app here is actually your web component. And if you remember from my second slide, we were talking about the custom element standard. Now, so my app is a custom element. And where does all these elements reside? Inside your modules folder, you have a parent folder called my, inside which you have these web components, right? So why are we using a parent folder? Just so that we have grouping, or we technically call it a namespace, so that if you are building a product, maybe you call it my, and if your friend builds out a product, let's say Satya builds a web component, gives it to me, I want to make sure I have some segregation. I create a folder called Satya, and I put all his web components inside that. And I can use it in my code as in Satya-app. Okay, so that gives a segregation. My is purely for that. And app is actually your web component. So app is built as a folder, which contains a HTML file, JS file, and optionally a CSS file. So these three are bundled together so that you deliver a web component. You have seen the web standards where a custom element is created, shadow DOM is added. You don't do all of that logic here. All of it is taken care by the framework. So we are going to take a look at that, but just so that you know what index.html contains, it is this. Replace the code with whatever we have given. It's not going to replace a whole lot except for the title and some other icon resources and stuff.
If you have selected TypeScript, app.js instead
app.ts.
Again, another question with that. You don't have an option for selecting different SAS or less files. There is only option for CSS.
Correct.
You don't include that also.
I don't.
Well, configuration, I was not finding an option for CSS, which framework I want for CSS.
So the way CSS is built with the entire web components, not just Lightning web components, but web components as a standard, is that CSS is isolated to your own web component. So if you create a component and you have a shadow root associated with it, any CSS that you add to your web component is only within that shadow root. So styles do not propagate from the parent to child in case of web components. So your styling is going to be completely isolated, which is why we have a CSS file in which you can have reusable styles. We are actively working on sharing CSS files across web components where you can have a single file. Yeah, we are actively working on it, but like I said, the web component standard itself is pretty restricted on CSS. So we are running into issues with that. We are trying to make sure the experience is best for everyone. So that is the first replacement that you have done. You should be able to see the updates live on your local host, which is okay. Now we are going to modify the app.html. So you all now know how to navigate to app.html. So app is a web component, HTML is the front end, and JS is the back end for it. So in the front end, go to app.html. It contains a lot of code because you are seeing that lightning bolt icon and all of that as a part of the scaffolding. Remove all of it, just put this small content, you'll be able to see the output immediately.
So most of like few people I was seeing in other product, this is not recognized as command. So what so the problem could be right because of your node installation, not the correct version or whatever the version, the beyond 5 version. Okay, you'll be seeing that most of the times it reinstall your node.
Can you open that?
Which one?
And also, I can have a folder.
Yeah, you can go to Google and it's the same other.
Okay, so for register web component, you would have chosen no. So in one of the options, we ask you to select all defaults. So you might accidentally have selected register web component as no, which is when it creates a different folder structure for you. So you can run that command again. I think you followed the concept, right? So you can maybe create a new project, follow the defaults, and then you'll get this.
Replace everything in the app.html?
Yes, replace everything. Because this code was the example that I showed you. We are going to build a new app, right? So just replace all of the code.
Sorry, we didn't. There was no option.
Yeah, maybe because you selected Edge browser as yes, it would have done that. Okay. So important thing to note about the HTML content that you're pasting, you'll see that everything is within the template tag. Okay, it is not within a HTML tag. We spoke about templates earlier, where it allows you to create reusable code snippets. And that is how the template content is structured. So actually, let me also do it. Okay. And let's briefly take a look at what the JavaScript file contains. It actually contains very less syntax. Here we are using import and export, which are again ECMAScript standards, where we are importing the relevant Lightning modules into our code. We are exporting the default module so that other components can reuse our web component. Now we are using classes here, which is again an ECMAScript standard. And classes is again a part of your web component specification. If you were to create a web component without using any framework, you would actually create a class to assign that functionality to that web component. So here, our isolation is you create your HTML content and you create your functionality within the class. We take care of creating the custom element and adding the shadow DOM and all of that. We take care of it for you. You don't have to do that. Worry only about what name you're giving to your web component, what is the code that you're writing. So, yeah.
Where that component has been registered, we have written in HTML my app.
Correct.
And we have an app.js.
Correct.
Where is that?
So what happens is you have an index.html, index.js file in which you register only the high level app. You don't register all the web components. So this is built in a way that the high level my app is what is registered with the service. Internally, whatever web components are used are automatically registered under this. So that logic you don't have to.
Small, what you can say, app like small components.
Correct.
All components have to be registered, written here, or we can have it inside my app.
So the way it works is index.html is a standard HTML file. If you want to use a web component inside index.html, you will have to register it in index.js. But if you want to use any of the other components inside your app itself, you don't have to do that, because if you, let me undo this. So if you notice, this is my app.html previously, and here I have my-greeting. My-greeting is another web component inside my folder, but I'm not registering this because I'm using it inside another web component only. I only need to register it if I'm using it in index.html. Right? So we paste that. Index app.js is going to remain as it is. We are not writing any functionality at the moment. What we are doing here is now we are styling it a little bit. So feel free to copy paste the CSS files into app.css. Nothing much happening there. It is plain CSS, no catches or anything. You can do it. What you'll notice is your app now has refreshed on the browser and it looks something like this. Yeah, it depends on what version I'm running. Lightning conference app, anything is fine. So that is the second step that we have taken, where you have understood how web components are structured. What is the syntax? You have the HTML file with template tags. You have the JS file with import and export. That is all in this unit. So you can feel free to verify this step and go on to the next unit, which is create a data service module. So here is where we are doing this particular step that is very, very, very specific to the project that you're building right now, because you have built a UI which is good, but where do you get the data from? So we told that you could use your own data source to get your data. But in this case, we are going to make a call out to an external application that we have built, which serves you JSON data. And actually, one of this step here says you can click this link to view what the data looks like. So you'll see that it is JSON. Okay, now we are building the data service in order to fetch this. And the reason we are building a data service is again a best practice, because we build a service, reuse it across different components. Ideally, I could have written this call out, or I would invoke this API right from within my JS file, my app.js. But I'm not going to do that, because if I build a service once, If I build a new component in the future, I can reuse it. Keeping that in mind, we are going to create a new service. For that, just follow these steps. Inside modules, create a folder called data, and in the data folder, create a folder called session service. So following this steps, what are you doing? You're creating another web component, because I told you that my was one of the folders. Now you're going to be creating a data folder inside which you're going to place more web components. And now, when I say web components, we allow you the flexibility to create a UI-based component or a service component. All your UI-based components are going to have the HTML file because there is an output that is shown. But in case you want to share JavaScript functionality across different components, you can create a web component with just the JS file and import it into different modules. So we give you that flexibility. The naming convention is service, but you can feel free to call whatever if you want. Okay, so let's do that. Inside my modules, I create a folder called data. Inside that, create a folder named session service. So we have built Trailhead in a way that you can copy paste a lot of code. There is a copy button, just click it, you'll be able to copy it. And inside the session service folder, create a name with session service.js. So another thing that you'll notice is the naming convention. So inside a folder, your HTML file, JS file, CSS file all have the same name, which is how we are able to tie them together. So inside your service file, just copy this code. This code is not doing a whole lot. It is configuring the URL, and you're defining a method called getSessions. It's just a function. Okay, and this function, anyone recognizes this syntax? Yeah, this is the fat arrow function, which is a way of replacing anonymous functions, right? So again, as a part of the new ECMAScript standard, there is a newer way of doing the same thing. So instead of writing it as function, open and close braces, and declaring a function, you can just do it this way. Fetch API, again a JavaScript standard, which is used to make callouts. And that is, you can find it as a part of your web standards, Mozilla specifications and all. Any JavaScript file can use it. We are making a callout, getting the data. And in order to get the data, we are using it like a promise. So promise is a way of asynchronous JavaScript. So you make a call out to an endpoint, you wait for the endpoint to execute, and the then function gets executed. So promise, again, please note something that we did not invent, something that the Lightning Web Component framework also did not invent. Promises is an ECMAScript concept for executing asynchronous JavaScript. We are leveraging the exact same code. There is no single tweak also done. This is the exact syntax you can copy from Google. Okay, and we are actually writing some more logic here to return the session ID for filtering and stuff, because we built a data service. You filter out something, we pass that filter to the service, get updated data back. So don't worry too much about this data service. It's just for you to access data. Once you do that, you're all good. Okay, the third unit is also complete. So you will see how each minor components are structured into a unit, that you're able to understand things well. Everyone executed the session service. Just copy the session service. Now, in the next step, we are going to integrate the session service into our app. Okay, then we'll take a look at how you're able to import shared JavaScript and all of that. So should I proceed? Anyone wants me to wait? Okay. Sorry? Satya will be able to help you with the error. All right, I am going ahead. Any errors, Satya will help you simultaneously, and you can catch up pretty quickly. It is copy paste, just listen to the concepts. Now, what are we going to do? So what have we built so far in the UI? So we have updated app.html to only have a title bar. We created a data service to get the data. Now we want to show that data in a list. Again, you could write all of this code inside your app.html itself, but we want to use best practices. So we are going to create each component as a web component. So the session list is going to be a web component that is embedded within your app.html. So again, follow the same steps. Inside your existing my folder, create a new session list component. So it is like you're creating a new web component. Follow along with me or follow at your own pace. Create a session list.css. New file. And so all of these styles are our own styles. We wanted to style the app beautifully, so we used it. Feel free to use any color you want, doesn't really matter. Now, what comes next is important. So next we are going to create a session list.js. So our new session list web component is going to show a list of records. So for which you need to query that list and show it in the UI. We are going to look at how you're going to query it first. So session list.js, you create, copy this code. What you'll notice in the code is the first import statement and your class are the same for every component. It's just that the name of the class is going to change. And the naming convention is that whatever is the name of your web component, have that as the name of your class. Okay. So the next thing, I created a data service. I need to use it in my code. How do I do that? I write an import statement. I import that particular get sessions function that I exported from that file into my code. Import export, again JavaScript standards. You can import functionality from other files. You can export functionality to other files. So we are importing a function we created. Now line number 7, you notice something called as a connected callback. So every app that you develop in any programming language has a life cycle. So when does the app get created? When does the app get put inside the DOM? When does the app get destroyed? So if you want to map it to your programming languages, you typically have a constructor which gets executed every time you create an object. So these are called as lifecycle hooks. And connected callback is one such lifecycle hook. Again, this is also not related to the Lightning Web Component framework. This is a web standard. So you can copy connected callback, go to Google and paste it. What you'll see is a Mozilla documentation, again as a part of your custom element standard and all, where connected callback is used, is what you'll be able to see. So you can use it in any JavaScript. So again, I want to reinforce the fact, all of these are web standards. The framework is very, very light. All it does is create your custom element, add backwards compatibility and stuff. Now inside that, I'm calling this function. Again, you will notice this get sessions is a function. I'm calling it like a function call. But because get sessions is making an API call out, I want it to run asynchronously, which is when I'm using promises. So in order to get the result from a promise, you use .then. So again, I'm not going to explain a lot of JavaScript because it is again a whole new session. So this is a promise. Inside my class, I have a property called sessions. So inside any class object-oriented concepts, you have member variables and member functions. So this is one such member function. And inside JavaScript, we don't call them as really variables. We call them as class properties. What you'll notice here is a decorator. So decorator is again an upcoming standard. And the purpose of a decorator is to enhance the capability of a given property. And the purpose of track is to make sure that your UI gets updated every time this variable gets updated. So the concept is called as reactiveness, where your property value changes, then your UI is automatically updated. So that is how you can use track. And this is imported from your LWC bundle.
It's like a binding.
Yes, I'm coming to that. So properties in Lightning Web Components are one-way bound. They are not two-way bound because two-way has some security implications. So it is a conscious decision that we have made after multiple research that we don't want to have these properties two-way bound. So you can update your JavaScript properties by whatever means. they will reflect in the UI. But any updates from the UI have to be delivered to the JavaScript file using onChange functions. So let's say you have an input box, you type something in there, and you want to update the JavaScript property based on that. You create an onChange. So you say input onChange execute a function, and inside this function you do this dot property name is equal to the latest value. So it is a pure one-way binding. Okay, now that is the purpose of track. In the very latest edition, some of you, we are, like I said, we are upgrading this Lightning Web Component framework. So based on some feedback that we got, in the latest version, depending on whatever got installed on your system, sometimes you don't require to use the track from decorator. Because in the very latest versions that we are rolling out, we are making all the JavaScript properties reactive by default. So sometimes you might notice even without track, your UI is getting updated. That is because you are running the latest version. And as and when it becomes generally available to everyone, we will update our documentation also accordingly. So it is still being tested, so we are doing partial rollout. So yesterday in my installation, I was able to do it without track also, because that was a instance that I got.
That means you don't need to import it out.
Yeah, you don't need to write track and you don't need to import it. So in some cases, it is reactive by default. Things are rolling out, things are getting updated, so just keep an eye out. But even if you use track, it is not going to harm anyway. Okay, because track is meant for that. If we remove it in future, like I said, the framework is becoming thinner and thinner. If we decide something is the web browser itself is capable of doing it without us having to implement it, we will remove that from the framework. So in the end, our vision is a lightweight framework which heavily relies on web standards. And right now, because this reactiveness is not something the browser was capable of doing, we built it. But if the browser is capable of doing it now, we'll remove it. So there are chances that some things that you build here might get even simplified in the future. So this is a very simple JavaScript file that you can write. All the
Data types.
Yeah.
It's an array.
Yeah, it works with arrays. It can be with Boolean. It can be with anything.
I mean, other than general preemptive data type, any other also custom objects.
Custom objects. So
if I am trying to create my own, like array is there, I have my data model, and that data model, if I want as a reactive. So right now, okay, go to HTML.
Any data model is going to get converted into an object inside JavaScript. So whatever is your class definition, it is an object. It is a primitive data type. So any changes to that will reflect. So a very simple implementation. Again, to recap, we are importing a function, calling that function inside a lifecycle hook, assigning it to a local property, and making sure that property is going to update the UI. And any complex logic that you write is going to be relied on the same thing. Maybe you will have 20 different functions inside. Maybe you will have 100 properties. But this is the core concept. Going back, so we describe all of the track decorator and all of that. Now coming into the HTML. So let's create the view for that. So inside my session list folder, I create a file for HTML this time. And paste it. So what is happening in here? You have the template tag as usual. You have a lot of HTML content. You have a list that is in the backend. How do you bind it to the front end? First question. How do you iterate over multiple values is the second question. So your JavaScript properties and functions are bound using this syntax of open and close curly braces. So within this open and close curly braces, you can use any property or function. I say function because when you're defining an on-click handler, you say on-click, open and close braces, whatever is the function name. It is bound to your JavaScript file. And this whole line, template for each, is used to iterate over values. So you're binding an array. It's just like a simple for loop, but it's just that inside HTML, we call it a directive. So you declare a template tag, specify for each, put in a list. For item is a iterable value. So in your for syntax, you have for I is equal to 0, I plus plus. So that local iterable value I is what is the session. And in case you want to know what is the current index, so whether you are iterating on the 0th element or 1 or 2 or 3, you can also optionally specify the index. And inside that, you can again use the properties like, if you look at the JSON, you'll see that it is a session which has properties like name, session date and time and all of that. So using a simple dot notation, you're able to access all of those properties. There is a mandatory key attribute that you have to give in the parent element which you put inside template for each. This is something that we are adding in the framework, and the reason for this is performance. So assume you have 200 sessions. You are returning 200 sessions from the backend. You are iterating over that and rendering all the 200 in the front end. Let's say one of the sessions has changed. So the 199 session has changed. So we don't essentially repaint all of the 200. We only go to the 199th node. So in that case, 199th p tag, and only re-render that. How is the framework able to know which exact element to re-render? Is the use of the key attribute. So you're going to have a unique property inside your array, bind it to the key attribute so that only that particular node is re-rendered and not the entire list. So that again is for pure performance basis. So that is about our very simple HTML file. Don't forget to save all of these components. And how is it that you add it to your HTML is this way. We have built a new web component session list. It is done. You created a JavaScript file, CSS file, HTML file. Now I need to embed this web component inside my app.html, which right now only has my title bar. So go to app.html. Wherever it says add components here, just put this tag. Now you'll notice that I added a tag, but I added a tag with a different name. So how will you know how to add a tag? I create a web component with the name session list. I use the camel case here where first letter is small and there are some capital letters. In order to use it as a web component, you'll have to use it in a kebab case, which means right now in the my folder, I have the session list web component. So the name of my tag is going to be my hyphen session hyphen list. So wherever there's a capital letter in my component name, I split that with a hyphen. So that is called the kebab case, and that is how you add a custom element into the UI. So now you save this, and hopefully your Lightning conference should automatically reload and show a list from the UI. Okay. Now this doesn't look anything like this. The reason is we haven't styled it completely yet. That is what we are going to do in the next steps. So we are going to improve the user interface. So what you can do is you can simply start copy pasting all of this. The concepts I explained to you is not going to change. Only thing is changing is the way we structure the HTML. Right now we put only a p tag. Now we are going to create a div and all of that so that we are able to appropriately style it. So feel free to follow the instructions. They are not going to be complex at all because it is only beautification at this point. So replace, I think it is done. Yeah, it looks somewhat better at this point of time. So that is what we built. Feel free to look at the code at your own pace, but let's move on to the next one. Adding the search capabilities. So you have seen how to show a list. Now we are going to add a search bar, and here is where I'm going to talk about how the binding works. I spoke about one-way binding already earlier. So we are going to create a text box, send that value to the backend, and then update the list accordingly. So for that, you obviously add an input box. If you read the instructions very carefully, we also specify where exactly you are supposed to add this input tag. Just for aesthetic purposes, you can add anywhere you want, but the text box has to come on top of the list. So inside my div class list, I add my input. And what you'll notice is again my familiar binding syntax. This time, this is going to be a function. And this is the function definition. I save this file, JS, and I create a function. A very simple function, nothing much complicated. Everyone is used to writing change handlers. It accepts event as a parameter, and to get the value, it is event.target.value. and we are assigning it to sessions, search key, and some logic to filter out from the sessions. Pure JavaScript logic, nothing much web components is doing here. You can write for loop, you can write anything that you want in order to filter out. So don't worry too much about that, but this should effectively finish your search functionality. LWC app, and sometimes it doesn't work, maybe, I don't know. Yeah. So your search functionality is added. If something doesn't work, feel free to refresh the browser. All performance issues, not uncommon. So that completes your session list web component, which ideally is supposed to take 10 minutes because all you're doing is creating a web component with it.
On input, you have added a handler. How to pass custom parameters in that? Because I don't see it's only taking event as a parameter.
Correct.
If
So you cannot like pass custom parameters. You will have to access it directly from the DOM by using like template.querySelector if you want to access any values.
From the TS
Yeah, so I will show you. Correct, I understood your question. So here you're only passing search key input, which takes event as a parameter, standard event. But if you, let's say you have another input tag and you want to get its value, ideally you will have to use a query selector inside your JS file, document.querySelector.
But is there any way where I can, because document.selector, if I do, it will search the whole page.
Correct.
If I have particular component specific, and only this template, should I write that in something on the template where it only search within this template, not in the whole DOM?
Actually, whatever you write inside the JS is limited to only your template tag. Anything within the web component only you'll be able to search within this JS file. We are not. So exactly, I just told it to you for better understanding, but we don't use document. We actually prohibit you from accessing the DOM and stuff. So you'll write this.template.querySelector, and then you access the value.
Is the object actually you will get.
Correct. You get this.template and you'll use that. That is one of the ways that you can access. The second way, which as a best practice we try to implement, is if you have multiple input fields, we bind on change to all of those so that whenever the value changes, the properties are updated in the backend. You don't have to get something explicitly.
So there is something related to you told earlier, right? If you want to remove an element from that DOM, you will be using the this.template.
This.template, yes.
So, okay. That's how we tackles only that portion of.
Correct. It only tackles that portion, and there are multiple reasons for that. The first one is there is a shadow DOM that is in effect. The second reason is it is again a forward-looking statement. Within our Salesforce platform, if you use this framework, we use something called as a locker service. Lightning locker is what we call it, that prevents from all these cross-domain accesses. Other files won't be able to access your JavaScript and modify it. Complete security package is built into that lightning locker. So there are plans to bring that onto this open source version as well. Again, completely forward-looking. We don't know if it will happen or not also, but Shadow DOM itself is enough restrictive that you won't be able to easily access cross components, cross framework, and all of that, which is why it is very important to ensure you use this .template.querySelector. So I think that finishes this final, the last but one chapter. So everyone. Which one?
The PWA.
Progressive web apps.
Yes. It follows all the standards of that.
Correct. I mean, the Webpack takes care of loading your JavaScript files in a progressive way. It depends. It prioritizes it. It loads the framework, loads the dependencies and stuff. I'm going to show you that network tab in the end. So that is how it is dealt. Not really a progressive web app kind of an architecture at the point.
But currently, it is not the PWA app.
It is not the PWA app. It's not a PWA app.
This cannot be readily deployed to web and look like an app. Right? That is what it was in the morning that
The morning session I said, it is
you can deploy anywhere.
Yeah, you if you're talking about that, you can deploy this onto any other platform and make it look like an app. So if you have an app which has an HTML container, after you build this for production, it is going to give you a JS file and an HTML file. You'll be able to use that inside your container and still make it look like an app.
So it won't be like a native app, still a web app.
Yeah, it is a web app. It won't be a native app. But if you think that that is something that everyone wants, you can bring it up to us. I'll share my contact credentials in the end. So any feedback. So this is not just a one-way session. I'm showing you only what the framework is.
In the morning, he mentioned that this is a bit of an app because you just write once and it will work across all the devices.
See, I'll have to be very frank. I don't know the exact definition of PWA, but if you talk about specific features like write once and deploy anywhere, then this definitely does that. Okay, so I don't know how it ties back to PWA, but the concept of writing once, deploying anywhere is applicable. So yeah, I'm going to only talk about the features that this thing has currently, but if you have any questions, if you have any feedback, or if you have very specific requirements, get back to me. I will talk to the product team and see if that is something that they have already implemented that I don't know about, or I can add it to the roadmap, or I can answer your question in a way that they answer me.
So
Okay.
even the product assets, they also use the same one, the Salesforce development team also.
Yes, this is the exact framework that we use internally for building our own apps, including the clouds that we build and including custom applications that customers build. So this actually, you will notice at the end of this unit, you are able to run this full-fledged conference application, but there is still one more unit left. And why is that? Because a conference management app is not about just looking at details of a conference. You need to have the ability to click into it and go into the details as well. So this is the app, that is the end result. Here is our current app running on localhost, which is currently not having any click functionality. So in this last unit, we are going to build that click functionality, for which anybody wants to take a guess. Are we going to create a web component? Yes or no? So we have a list. We want to show the details now.
Next page.
In the next page. So we are going to create a web component. So we are not going to write the thing in the same code. Okay. Now, before jumping into that unit, very important thing to note is we are not using any routers of any kind. Okay, so because we again want to give you the flexibility to use any router, open source router of your own choice. We don't want to restrict you to using our own routers. Okay, so for now, what you'll notice in the details web component is we have built this showing and hiding of the details versus list in a completely customized way. Ideally, for production use cases, you would want to use a router service, but here we are doing it in a custom way where we are using hide and show methods, and we are using window.history methods so that your URL back button also works. So let's build that. You will understand what is happening. Feel free to start doing this. There is nothing new that is happening here. All we are doing is building a new web component utilizing the same data service, but the UI is a bit different, where instead of showing a list, you are going to be showing a single detail of the session. Inside my session details, .js. Yeah, just copy paste, but I found something that I have to explain here. I've told you about the track decorator, but here there is a new decorator called API. So by default, all the properties that you declare inside your JavaScript file are private. So you won't be able to set those values from outside your component. Now, in order to give access to this property outside the component, you'll have to decorate it with @API, which makes it public. Okay, you're going to see that. So right now I have decorated session ID and all with API, which means I'm able to access the session ID property from outside my component as well, which means if I have a parent-child relationship, I'll be able to pass the value from the parent to the child by means of an attribute. Okay, we'll take a look at all of that, but this is all this does. Session details.html. So in this file also we are introducing a new directive which is called if true. So previously you have seen how to iterate over values, but how do you want to conditionally hide and show elements? Okay, so we don't recommend using JavaScript and all to do that because accessing DOM is not generally that secure, and jQuery is anyways out of the question because it is like a whole security wise you won't be able to do it that well. So if true and if false as directives within a template allow you to control hiding and showing, and if true is bound to a JavaScript property. So whether you want to hide or show an element is completely controlled from your JavaScript side. You set the value to a Boolean property and your HTML is going to render automatically depending on whether you're using track or whether that functionality is built in. So that is if true. Session details.css again to make everything look good. So don't worry about this huge CSS that we have written. All we want to do is when you build an app, we want you to have the satisfaction that you build a visually appealing app, not some random black color text. So we did that. Now inside app.html, I'm going to add my new web component. So again, the casing is my-session-details because of the kebab case. And what you'll notice is session ID being passed as an attribute. So inside my code, I have had session ID, which I decorated with @API. So now the way I can set it, like I said, is passing it like an attribute value. And again, because I is capital here, having it in a kebab case way, it is session-ID. So you have that inside your app.html. Now inside app.js, we add some functionality. Again, we are using track. Now starting from here, all the functionality that we are going to add. So if you notice your app.html now, it contains both the list and the details. So if you render it, both will be shown. So from now on, the features that we are going to add is to ensure that if you have a session ID, the detail shows. If you don't have a session ID, the session list shows. So for that, obviously, we are going to be using the template if true and if false. And for that, we want to know if a session ID is there or not. So depending on that, you'll see the remaining code being functioning accordingly. This is done. Wiring everyone together.
So if you're running now, you'll see both, correct?
Yeah, technically both, but right now the session ID will not be accessible, right? It is null. So you can look at the output now. It shows some errors. We are still supposed to build it out. I'll show import track also. Let me see now. Yeah, it is null, so obviously no details will show. We'll start assigning values at which point you will get to know about it. So now, how do you try to hide and show things? Okay, I'm clicking on a list and then the detail component is getting hidden or shown, which means I'm trying to do some action upon a user click, which means I'll have to fire an event. So events are a way in which you can communicate across components where you can pass data as well along with the events. So here what we do is we have an A tag that we defined on the list inside my session list.html. So here it is just an A tag for now, but I want to add an on-click functionality. So I paste this, which is going to add a new function called handle session click. I define that inside my JS file. Now what you'll notice here is we are firing a custom event. So this again is a part of the ECMAScript standard where you can fire your own events, a custom event. Obviously standard events are on click and all of that. But here I want to fire a navigate event. So I define a new event object of whatever type I want, whatever data I want to pass, and I use this.dispatch event to dispatch that event. So this is again pure JavaScript. So I mentioned at the very beginning, right, that it might get a little bit overwhelming as we go towards the end because we are using a lot of web standards which you might not always be aware about. So these are all web standards. Once you learn this, you'll realize you are using all the same things to build your code. Now you build that and you save the session list.js. So your list component now is built in such a way that you click on it, it fires a navigate event. Now it is up to all the other components to handle that navigate event. So how do you configure them to handle that navigate event? Is by using this syntax. Okay. So I go to my app.html again. So here I have session list, which is firing an event. So in order for the parent component to handle that event, just like you say on click, you get to specify on navigate because I have created a custom event with the name navigate. So if you see here, I created a custom event with the name navigate, which is why I'm able to put an on navigate on top of my component. Okay, so that is the way it works. And handle navigate is again a function whose definition I can write inside my JavaScript code. 10 minutes. So what am I doing here? Session list, I click, I send the data using the app.html, which is the parent component I handle, and I assign that event detail to the session ID. So right now my session ID is going to get some ID, right? So I spoke about both of these components being on the same page. Now if I go to my output and I click on it, you will see that the details are shown below. But now I want to build it in such a way that if I'm showing this, hide this list. If I want to go back, hide this detail and show the list. So it's a hide and show concept I want to implement, ideally using a router service. But for now, we are going to do it completely using JS. And going back here, adding navigation. So all of this code is pretty much using history API of the browser. So it is going to add the URL to the history to make sure if you click the back button, it goes and stuff. So don't worry too much about this logic. Where is my VS code? Okay, app.js. I need to add it here. And constructor. So this is another lifecycle hook. Previously we have seen connected callback. Now it is constructor. Both there is a lifecycle in which both of these get executed, where constructor is executed the moment your component is created, while connected callback is executed when the component gets loaded into the DOM. So depending on where you want it, you can add that logic right after track state. It's fine. Then handle navigate is another function where. So all of this, don't worry too much because it is pure JS logic that we are trying to build to hide and show. Why is it showing a lot of red? Duplicate name handle navigate. Okay. So what you have seen here is because I'm using VS Code, I have a plugin called linting that is inbuilt, which is going to help me write better code. So it is going to show me any errors that I might be writing. So yeah. One of the advantages you get with using IDEs, so it's fine. Then two getter variables, write them. So finally, I built all my JS logic based on the session ID to hide and show, add things to the window.history.state and stuff. Now in my HTML, I'm going to wrap both of these inside template if true. So if it is true that the state is a list, I'm going to show the session list. And if the session detail variable is true, I'm going to show the session details. Okay, so that is all that I'm doing here. And you will now notice if you go to the output that I click here, the details are shown. And if I click the back button, I come back to the list. So ideally, if you don't do that window.top state and all of that, the back button wouldn't work. But if you refresh the page, it would come back to the list. So that is one thing that has happened. Now, finally, we also do some more stuff. Again, speaker details. is something that we are going to add, because right now I go to a list, it's only the abstract that is shown. I want to show the speaker details as well in two different tiles, which I'm going to do next. Again, pretty simple, you're going to create another web component for speaker card and add all of this. Nothing new over here. If you notice, you're using template for each and if true. So feel free to complete this at your own pace, because I plan to show one more feature that everyone was asking about, that is the build back.
So, like you use the API decorator to communicate from the parent to child, right?
Correct.
So, does it support the child to parent?
So, parent to child is using attributes, you pass it. Child to parent is using events. So, you have seen from the list, I clicked on it, which means an event is fired from the child, and the app.html, which was my parent, handled it. So, communication top to bottom, attributes, bottom to up, events.
How are the IDs assigned?
Sorry?
IDs, how are they assigned?
So the IDs are typically assigned dynamically. So we recommend you using some other things like data attributes, or maybe use the index thing to identify which index. Yeah, we are not doing anything. So the framework tries to render IDs globally so that there are no conflicts. So don't heavily rely on the ID attribute. So even though you can use it, it might change when you deploy it onto the app overall. So that is a tiny bit of a thing to remember.
If ID is not static, then all the automation is.
So that have to rely on some other mechanism. So using some other attributes that you can define, data attributes or index attributes. So the ID generally is, you might feel ID is global to your component, but you can use the same ID across different components, in which case it is no longer the same unique ID across your DOM. So in which case the framework tries to globalize the IDs.
So you have to use classes.
Preferably classes, because you can define a number of classes without affecting anything. But other data attributes is also fine. So you will notice this is my 3001, that is I'm running my watch command, which is running in the development mode. So I'm getting a whole lot of files here, and you'll see there is a app.js, node vendors, main.js, and another app.js. And the sizes are 948 KB, 190 KB. They're taking some amount of time to load. And you'll notice that the Webpack takes care of loading these things in parallel if necessary, or if there are dependencies, Webpack knows what to do. This is all about your development server. But now what if you want to run this in a production use case? Okay, so if you go back to your package.json, you'll see that watch is one of the commands, but I have build development and build production. So let me see what will happen if I do npm run build. Okay, so right now you have seen that these folders exist. So once the build completes, it creates a distribution folder for it. And take some time, but should be done. So now a distribution folder is created, and you'll notice that resources, that is my images and all, come into resources. Again, I configure them from my LWC services config, where from SRC client resources, it has to go to distribution resources. The things which are static, they go into there. And you'll notice now there is only one index.html. You have an app.js and 0.app.js. All of the web components that you build, all the HTML that you build, all of that is going to be built into these two JavaScript files. And the naming convention is such a way that the Webpack understands which thing to load first and which thing to load next. The prioritization happens through this. And now once my build is done, how do I execute a build pack? So for that, I use another command called npm run serve, again a part of your package.json. So serve is typically to run into the production build environment. So when I do this, it creates another port 3002. If you remember from the initial configuration, the dev server runs on 3001. The actual server runs on okay, why is it not a function?
you might have.
Oh shit, I might have forgotten importing something from app.js. This is app. I imported it. Why is it fine? Okay, it's fine. Custom express config is not a function, and I'm looking. No, sir, I did it. That's it. Okay, I don't know why we are running into issues. We can check. Like I said, things are being updated. But the most important thing I wanted to show you is this app.js and 0.app.js. And if one of you is able to execute it successfully, yeah, in the network tab, you'll notice that these two files don't exceed like more than 10 or 15 KB, as opposed to the 948 KB and all of that we have seen in the development server. So that is the difference between the production instance and the development instance where we pack it for you. You can reach out to me. I mean, I'll try to debug what this issue was about. Maybe it is some mistake I made when configuring things, most likely. Is someone able to execute the serve command?
What was the command for building?
npm run build. Everyone is getting the same error, right? So let me check and get back. So that is that actually completes this project. So feel free to finish this in your own time, and after that go back to this trail and so in this trail feel free to go through the other documentation links that we have. I also want to bring to your attention one more feature, that is we released something called as recipes, which is again a part of the documentation, of course. But what this is, easy to consume code samples. So I spoke about a lot of things today in the context of a real life scenario. But what if you want to learn the concept in a standalone way? We've built in recipes for that so that you can see how things are built, very tiny code samples, 30 lines of code or less. So you type something, how do things reflect dynamically, conditional rendering, we have already gone through it. For each, we have gone through it. Composition, which talks about parent-child relationships, we have gone through it. And how do you use third-party libraries? Maybe you want to use like D3JS or something. How do you do that? So code samples for all of that have been built into recipes. So I would ask you to go and look at it in order to see how things are done. And with that, before moving on to the Q&A, of course, it was a live Q&A. I think Satya was doing a very good job of answering online questions as well. So here is one tiny program that we are running. So in case you or some of your friends out there are interested to move to a different platform and you're considering Salesforce as one of the options, we again have a free program for that called Journey to Salesforce, which is totally free and a combination of badges that you do. You have seen Trailhead, you have seen how a project looks. So what we have done is for a newcomer to Salesforce, in order to teach them all about the platform, we have grouped certain things together. And as a part of this program, we tell you that do this, after which you do this, and then you have learned Salesforce successfully. And in the end, we connect you with employers as well. So feel free to bookmark this URL, take a screenshot of it, and spread a word to your friends out there who are interested to move to a different platform. And with that, any final Q&A I'm willing to take right now. Any questions from this? All are answered. So with that, I would like to thank all of you for spending all of this time. I think it's the correct 2 hour. I don't think.
Hungry time.
Yeah, everyone must be hungry, and I finished right on dot. Yeah, the short URL is.
Yeah.
The short URL for the program is salesforce.co/j2s, while the short URL for the Lightning Web Components trail that we have seen till now is salesforce.co/learn-lwc, which is this one. So learn-lwc is to learn the tool. This is just for the tool. This is for the entire Salesforce ecosystem. And let me also do one thing. So this is my Twitter handle. Feel free to reach out to me on Twitter if you have any questions or if you have any doubts. And if you reach out to me, I'll actually try to debug this issue and let you know why that build command, serve command was not working. But other than that, any general questions about Salesforce ecosystem or Lightning Web Components, you can reach out to me as well.
Express config is not a sentence.
Yeah, I am also getting the same error. I'll take a look at why that is happening. But yeah, so with that, I think this session was helpful to you guys. If you feel otherwise, feel free to reach out to me and leave in feedback. But I hope you have a wonderful rest of the day and tomorrow for Open Source India. And all of you joining us online, hope the session was informative to you as well. And if you have any questions, like I said, feel free to reach out to me. And have a great rest of the day.
Thank you.